Hello, everyone. This is Francisca from the Cavell Group. Welcome to today's session. Before we dive into the imperative for differentiation in the cloud communication space, there are a couple of things I'd like to mention. This webinar is being recorded, so if you wish to rewatch at a later time or share it with your colleagues, you will be able to do so, as the recording will be provided to you shortly. Also, if you wish to read more about how to compete in a maturing market, a free white paper covering this topic will be available for you to download. And lastly, please feel free to ask us any questions you may have using the chat section of this app, and we'll be more than happy to answer them at the end. So without any further ado, I will now hand over to my colleague, Mark Demarsiak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisca. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to this webinar about the imperative for differentiation in the cloud comms space, how to compete in a market that's maturing fast. My name is Mark Demarsiak from the Cavell Group, which I'll introduce in a moment. And I will be running this presentation for the next 25-30 minutes, after which I'll hand over to Chris Carabello, who is a Senior Director in Product Marketing in Metaswitch, and he will give a short presentation about the Metaswitch solutions in this space, after which we'll hand back to Francisca, who will take us through the questions that have come through. So do please ask your questions in the chat window, and we'd be delighted to answer them at the end of the session. So let me first of all introduce the Cavell Group, with whom I'm an associate. So Cavell is what you'd call a boutique consulting firm, and boutique in this context means that all we look at really as an analyst and as a consultant and a market research house is we look at the cloud comms space, what used to be called unified comms as a service. So we really are very, very focused and very specialized on that. And you can see from the chart, the slide, the range of companies with whom we've worked. We work essentially with vendors in this space, so people like Metaswitch, and we also work with service providers. And the kind of things that we do are help with go-to-market, our strategy, and from our professional services team, we also offer some technical services. So that's the Cavell Group. Just a quick introduction to myself. So Mark Demarsiak. I have two halves to my experience. One is working with the vendor community. So originally IBM and latterly Cisco. But I've also spent a decade or so working in the service provider space. Specifically, I was out in the Middle East working for an incumbent telco that was in the transition phase from being, an incumbent with a monopoly to a privatized company without a monopoly, and moving from the TDM world to the IP world. So that was a very, very interesting experience. So I'm hoping that experience will help to animate this presentation and give you some insights. So what is the webinar about? Well, it is about the cloud comms market, and the hypothesis we have is that the cloud comms market, although it's still growing, there is maturity on the horizon and commoditisation. And the objective here is to give service providers some upfront kind of like indications as to what's going to happen and how you can differentiate to win. And just a quick note on nomenclature, we use the term cloud comms. It's defined as collaboration service that includes telephony delivered as a service from the cloud. It includes telephony, but it's not limited to telephony. So it will also include other types of collaboration tools, such as video and such as presence, and so on and so forth. And so the webinar will examine how service providers can best differentiate in this environment. We'll present some of our market research data as evidence of the maturing market, and the opportunity for service providers to start looking at how they can differentiate now based on a shifting market demand that is in the context of the three waves of cloud comms. So at the bottom of the chart there of the slide, you can see wave number one was just voice. The original impetus for cloud comms, which was replacing on-premise PBX devices. The second wave is around mobility and collaboration from the cloud. And the third is customer analytics and intelligence. So let's proceed rapidly. So we can see here the market size in terms of penetration of cloud comms users. So this is the proportion of users of collaboration tools and telephony that are delivered from the cloud, as opposed to those services that are delivered from on-premise systems. And you can see that in 2018, the US and the UK are around about the 15–20% mark, which means that 80 to 85% of users are using on-premise equipment. And within 5 years, we see that penetration going up to 35 or 40%. So there is strong growth, but once you start to reach that level of penetration, that growth will start to tail off. And we know that already there is pricing pressure out there. The other thing to note about this slide is that it's a very crowded marketplace. So in the UK alone, there are over 90 providers who are providing cloud comms. And we track them all, and we know that most of them are offering simple voice. And we know that most of them have very little differentiation to offer beyond the particular customer base that they have and the ability that they have to cut prices, which is not a great place to be. And we also know that there are 400 or so of these providers in the US. And just a word of warning about this chart. It contains data from two different sources. The UK data comes from the Cavell Group, and the US data is from Frost & Sullivan. Am I 100% confident that the UK penetration is slightly higher than the US rather than vice versa? Well, no, I'm not. It's a good enough evaluation. And what's interesting is that our two completely separately researched pieces of data are actually very similar, and the growth is near identical. So overall, this data is solid. So drilling down into that penetration, these two charts actually look at different company sizes based on the OECD definition that the OECD uses when it's analyzing financial data. So we have four categories of size of company: 0 to 9 employees, which I would call micro businesses; 10 to 49 employees, which I'd call small and medium enterprises, SMEs; 50 to 249 employees, which we call mid-market; and 250 or more employees, which we'd call enterprise. And a couple of things about these charts on the left. The first thing is that the addressable market, so the orange bit at the top, is largest in the micro businesses and in enterprise. And there's a number of reasons for that. Clearly, I think, as we probably all know, most businesses are micro businesses with 0 to 9 employees. So that means that. However, most of those companies don't have any kind of unified communications infrastructure, be it on-premise or from the cloud, because they rely on simple mobile telephony at their level, which actually creates opportunities going forward as simple UC type functionality is now starting to penetrate down that low in mobile centric solutions. And we'll be coming back to that in a moment. So there's an opportunity there. And you can see that the penetration is relatively low. The other area where the penetration is relatively low is in the mid-market, 50 to 249 employees, where it's actually only 12 and a bit percent. Whereas in the SME environment, the penetration is very much higher, almost 40%. Now, this is purely historical, these different types of penetration, but what it does do is indicate where the next big bets for the provider community are. So the SME segment is highly penetrated simply because that was the first target that cloud comms vendors went after. It was the low-hanging fruit, in which the companies were big enough to have an infrastructure, but probably not big enough to have a dedicated IT department, and are certainly interested and driven by cost savings. And so those companies were happy to move away from the overhead of running an on-premise UC or PBX system to the cloud. Whereas in the 50 to 249 employee, the mid-market range, those companies will typically have a large investment in their fixed telephony. They will want to sweat their asset. So our research shows that those types of company will typically keep their equipment, their hardware on premise for at least 7 years. And what's happening now is that in that life cycle of the cloud comms market, that equipment is starting to come to end of life. And there is now an opportunity then to target those larger companies with cloud comms solutions to migrate away from the world of the PBX. That has got some implications, which I'll come to a little bit later. But let me just introduce the fact that those companies, those mid-market companies, will have more sophisticated requirements than the SMEs, which means that they will be interested in going beyond just PBX replacement and voice, and will be looking at different types of cloud communications, things such as video, things such as mobility. And that changes, if you like, the imperative to differentiate on the provider environment. Okay, so moving on to the 3 waves of cloud comms. So it's generally understood that there are these three waves. The PBX replacement phase, which largely addressed the SME segment. And that part of that wave is now largely going to commoditize, because there's only so much you can do with PBX replacement and voice. It's hard to differentiate when you're selling such a simple solution. And the world, the service provider world, and the market is now moving towards phase 2, mobility and collaboration from the cloud. Now this creates a richer offering, a stickier offering, which means that clients will find it harder to churn away once they've bought it from you. And this is also being driven in terms of trickle down from the enterprise market, where mobility and collaboration are now well established, and the technologies are coming down in price and are becoming easier to use. And that is now happening, starting to happen quite rapidly. And then the third phase is customer analytics and intelligence. Now, this is really about the growing sophistication of the user base as they use these systems. A telephone is more than just a telephone today. It can do things like video. It can do things like record and analyze the data that comes from the transactions and the calls that a company has with its market, with its customers. And that data is very valuable, as we will come to a little bit later. And companies increasingly want to capture that data and analyze it. And that then becomes part of this cloud comms bundle and adds to the sophistication and adds to the opportunity that you have to differentiate. So let's look at the cloud comms functional landscape. Now this is a bit of original research that Cavell did, but it effectively splits the functional landscape into 2. There's the greeny bit on the left and the bluey bit on the right. The greeny bit is more focused on internal collaboration, and that is clearly less important and less relevant if you're a micro business or if you're an SME working from one location, and more important if you're a mid-market customer or an SME working from multiple locations. And on the right, the external communications is about voice. It's also about conferencing. It's also about video, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that has to be said is that today, at least 85% of cloud comms deployments are only about the 2 boxes, PSTN voice, and if they're lucky, advanced PBX functions. That is what the market is based on, and that is what the market is going to pivot away from, and the provider community needs to be ready for that. The outside bits of the landscape, I've got 2 orange boxes, business apps and analytics, that we'll talk about. So I've already mentioned analytics, Analytics is about understanding effectively how your customers interact with you and how you can improve your ability to communicate with them. And business apps is effectively saying that there are certain industries out there that have got standard applications, if you like, a sort of ERP type system that runs that industry, and being able to integrate your cloud comms solutions into certain of those applications gives you an opportunity to differentiate in the market. And then finally, around the outside, the yellow bit is mobility, and mobility is one of the key factors that is driving the market, and is also a great way for providers to differentiate by enabling a lot of these functions to operate in a native way on a mobile device, which is clearly very, very attractive for micro enterprises, but increasingly moving up to larger companies as well. And that is going to be one of the key trends, which is going to be essential for you to address going forwards. So that's the landscape, that's what's happening, that's the growth. So what are the possible strategies to react and to differentiate? Well, here are some ideas. So there's segmentation to innovate. There's differentiation from the competition. There's the concept of merging and buying rival companies, investing in research and development, focusing on improving go-to-market and collateral and messaging. Now, we don't have time to go into all of these today, so we'll be talking about the first two. We'll be talking about segmentation and innovation, and we'll be talking about differentiation from competition. So segmentation is key to differentiation, as most cloud comms offers are agnostic, are vanilla, if you like. So I said a couple of slides ago that 85% of cloud comms implementations are just voice, and just voice is kind of hard to differentiate. So other ways in which differentiation is possible is by adapting your offering to look possibly at a particular type of customer in terms of its size, in terms of the industry vertical in which it operates, in terms of how that customer interacts with its customers. So using cloud comms and collaboration to improve how your customers sell and communicate with their customers. And then finally, as I've just mentioned, mobility. So we'll look at each of these in turn. So first of all, I mean, different segments have got different customer drivers. So here I've got some examples which you can read on the chart. In orange, we have smaller end customers. In blue, we have the larger ones, the upper mid-market and above. And you can see that the smaller ones will be driven by things like lower cost, like mobility, like simple PBX functionality, like simple management and billing. They don't have the time, they don't have the effort, they don't have the resources to spend a lot of time running these systems. Whereas the upper mid-market will be interested in verticalisation. They'll be interested in analytics and contact centres. They'll be interested in integration with their applications through APIs, compliance and security. And so the message from this slide is that one size fits all just doesn't work. It used to work when the target market was only SMEs and it was only about telephony, but that has changed and that is changing. And so it's important to understand this and to tailor what you're doing to address this. And that means essentially differentiation. So let's look at the kind of solutions that can be offered to different customer sizes. So for micro businesses, as I've just said, they're interested in simplicity, things that are really intuitive and easy to use with no overhead, and that are really mobile centric. They don't want a fixed infrastructure. They don't want to go to their computers to manage their cloud communications. They want to do it all from their mobile phone, and they want it to be simple and easy. What's interesting here is that reporting, so in other words, analyzing the way in which they use these systems and the way in which their customers communicate with them is happening even down at that level, at the level of micro companies with 10 users. And we're coming across companies like Accession, who sell analytics from the cloud, who are finding micro customers who are interested in their solutions because it gives them an edge to understand about those customer interactions. And then moving up, clearly you've got vertical integrations, as I've mentioned. You've got international companies, you've got cloud contact center. Video also then starts to go down to smaller companies. And then as you move up the sophistication and the number of users, then reporting becomes more sophisticated and turns into full-blown analytics. So let's talk about verticalization for a second. So the original research that we've done has looked at verticals that service providers are specifically targeting and are penetrating at the moment. And you can see that a lot of providers don't have any vertical focus at all. And that's clearly historic. It's also indicative of the fact that most providers are very small and don't necessarily have the capability or the market kind of size to be able to differentiate, but some do. And you can see that there are no standout verticals. There's no sort of one that sticks out particularly, but let's just have a look at a couple. So retail is an interesting one because it relies very heavily on internal collaboration. Hospitality is another, and banking and financial services is a third. The banking and financial services one is interesting because the potential there is huge. These are typically large organizations that have a lot of money to spend, but they also have some particular constraints around compliance, which makes their consumption of these kinds of solutions kind of troublesome in terms of the need to customize some of the functions to fit their industry requirements and the sort of legal things that they have to do. And looking in the real world at how this verticalization works, there are some, you need to look at the sort of macroeconomic indicators in terms of the size of industries. Healthcare in the US and in Europe is a very, very large industry with a lot of money, and it consumes a lot of collaboration and communication. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to start selling. Hospitality is another one, education, another. And I'd just like to speak for a moment on this 8x8 on the left. So 8x8 has done some very clever work in the recruitment industry, which largely uses one application called Bullhorn. And Bullhorn is the ERP of the recruitment industry. And they think of it as a pane of glass through which everything they do through the day is through Bullhorn. And what 8x8 have done is they've integrated the cloud comms offering using APIs into this application and have automatically then generated a really serious differentiator that no one else can compete with in that industry. And most industries, not all, but most industries will have some standout popular applications that it's possible to integrate with. Now, let's move now to talk about customer interactions, which is a sort of, this one is less intuitive, it's less obvious than verticalization. But what's happening in the market generally is that the internet generation and the millennials are now live their lives on the internet and on their smartphones. And what they do as part of their decision to interact and purchase goods and services in the market is they will pre-qualify their requirement by doing research, by Googling, by going to your TripAdvisors and your review sites, and will either make a final decision or at least make a short list of what they're going to spend their money on before communicating with a vendor. And if you think about what the consequence of that is, well, 10 years ago, a vendor received, say, a phone call from a member of the public. Well, that was an unqualified lead that was about inquiring about your product, and was therefore not that likely to result in an immediate order. Today, the caller will have done that pre-qualification, will have decided what they want to buy, and so the dollar value of that call to a vendor has gone up. And missing that call is therefore a lot more damaging than it would have been 10 years ago. And so companies are now looking much, much more closely at how they interact with customers, because it's the customer that defines how they interact. And this creates a huge opportunity for the communications industry to add value to this process by making sure, for instance, that calls are never missed, because they can be forwarded to mobile phones, to hunt groups. It also means that you can start to measure things about customer satisfaction and emotion through recording calls and through understanding keywords. And there are, a number of KPIs around how you manage customer interactions, which are listed at the bottom there: Net Promoter Score, first contact resolution, etc. And in the white paper, I've added an appendix which actually defines these in more detail and gives you some ideas about how you can start to initiate these really interesting discussions with your customers about how you can add value to their customer interactions. And this phenomenon is manifesting itself in a number of ways. So we've talked about analytics and reporting. Suddenly, these analytics and reporting is no longer a nice to have in a contact center. It's actually an integral part of how businesses of any size sell, and how they capture the market and how they close business. Cloud Contact Center is now starting to sell even to very small businesses. Mobility, I've mentioned before. I'm calling it advanced mobility because it, in effect, is the ability for even a micro business to have a fixed line number and to appear like it's got premises and a telephony system, whereas in fact it just has mobiles. Context and sentiment we've mentioned. Integration into key applications like Bullhorn we've mentioned. And then WebRTC is a way in which video calls can be initiated with customers without the tedium of downloading applications to allow that to happen. So there's a number of things that are happening in the market that are manifesting that way in which the way in which your customers talk to their customers is changing. We've mentioned video, and this is one of the key trends, as I've mentioned. 93% of service providers see the importance of collaboration, including video, and over 50% of providers see demand for video from customers. And again, this is a phenomenon that is trickling down from the enterprise, where video is now well established, and smaller businesses are now finding that using video in interactions, either internally or with customers, is a way to transform that discussion and the way in which they interact. An example there is in the UK's Nationwide Building Society, which nationwide has installed video equipment in all of its branches and has got 3 contact centres in the country with several hundred specialist advisors who are there to talk to customers of Nationwide. Okay, the other key trend is about mobility. Okay, and this is driven by the millennials, by the mobile native generation. And the dynamics here are quite specific. It's not just about having some kind of overlay service where you can reach your UC system from your mobile phone. It's about seamless integration. It's about intuitive user interfaces, and it's about simplicity. especially down at that micro business layer. So it's about managing and maintaining the system. It's about adding users. It's about assigning new phone numbers, doing all of that seamlessly and easily from the handset, not from some portal somewhere, but actually as part of the integral app that's on your handset. That's advanced mobility. And the business drivers there are listed here. So attract and retain customers, reduce costs, and work flexibly. So your selling messages aren't about, oh, we've gone mobile, full stop. It's our solution has gone mobile, which allows you to attract and retain customers because you've got a one main business number, because you can assign temporary numbers, you can reduce costs, you can work flexibly. So there are business outcomes here that are part of the key messaging. And one of the factors that's coming out of this increased sophistication with advanced collaboration, with mobility and with video, is that the sale that you're making is now much more consultative than it used to be. You need to understand your customers' businesses in order to be able to add value through your solutions. It's not a commodity sale anymore. And there are a range of services, OneNet, Digits, etc., that are now appearing. And vendors like Metaswitch are innovating with advanced mobility products like Max that Chris will talk about a bit later. Okay, so we're almost at the end. Let me just very quickly give some points of view on cloud communications market. So innovation and differentiation are really important. I've mentioned mobility and video. Those are the two big things that are happening. And then customer interactions through analytics and AI are also major factors. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to step back and to talk about what we've been discussing here. So the market's maturing. There are opportunities, especially in micro businesses and mid-market. You'll remember the three waves of cloud collaboration: PBX replacement, mobility, collaboration, and customer analytics. The need then for you to segment and differentiate, and the ability to differentiate through verticalisation, through these more advanced customer interactions, through video and through mobility. And then finally, what all of this means in terms of your go-to-market is that you need to become much more consultative. Before I close, let me just mention the Cloud Comms Summit in partnership with the Cloud Communications Alliance next week in Washington. If you are in the area, we do have tickets left for this. We have 40 different service providers represented, and we are there with some of our vendor partners, including Metaswitch. So if you are interested, then please go to cloudsummit.com, and we'd look forward to seeing you there next week. And just finally, just this misquote of Charles Darwin: it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable to change. And the conclusion of my webinar is that change is on the way, and that the provider community really needs to embrace it. So thank you very much. I will now hand over to Chris.
Thanks so much, Mark. You can jump to my bio page. I really appreciate the very relevant and useful information. So I want to wish you a good morning and good afternoon. And in the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to provide everyone with a brief introduction to Metaswitch and our business solution, and expand on some of the insights that Mark shared on the opportunities for differentiation and how Metaswitch can assist you in delivering them. But first, very briefly, my bio is shown here. Like Mark, I spent the first part of my career at service providers, where I witnessed some of the challenges firsthand that Mark raised earlier. And I've sought to apply those learnings in my time at Metaswitch, where I now head up product marketing for our business solution. You can go to the next slide. Before talking specifically about our business solutions, first, a brief introduction to Metaswitch. Metaswitch is the world's leading cloud-native communication software company. We develop commercial and open source software solutions that are disrupting the way that service providers build, scale, and innovate communication services. We have a long, strong 35-year history of providing high-performance, hardware-independent software to the communications industry, and our success stems from a unique combination of our deep experience in software engineering which is primarily developed from our UK-based engineering teams with agile development capabilities, a highly regarded support team, and financial and organizational stability. We now serve more than 1,000 fixed, mobile, and converged global service providers. Next slide. We offer innovative software solutions that transform both communications networks and services. Products and solutions serving the core network include our Clearwater IMS core, Perimeter SBC, and our Metasphere and Rhino application servers in the services and applications layer, which deliver innovative cloud-native mobile, residential, and business software that improve operator business models and help quickly create new revenue-generating services. To be clear, we are exclusively focused on the service provider and not polluting our focus by also offering services direct to enterprise. Further, we are very committed to openness and have a large partner ecosystem and wide ability for both integrations and independent service creation via open APIs and a service creation environment. Next slide. Obviously, for today's webinar, we want to focus on our business applications. Cloud communications for business is one of the fastest and most lucrative markets for our customers. The migration of businesses from premises-based communications to cloud-hosted is well underway, as Mark illustrated earlier. The value proposition of cloud is clear, the business case is well made, and market awareness is high. And we are now at a critical chasm crossing stage of the market, with over 80% of the businesses still yet to move to the cloud. As a result, this is a $20 billion market forecasted to grow at over 15% annually. Metaswitch Business Solutions enable fixed and mobile operators to deliver a comprehensive portfolio of applications to businesses, all delivered from a flexible, carrier-grade, multi-tenant virtualized platform. These solutions are in use by over 21 million business users daily and are trusted by over 300 global service providers, putting us at a of UCaaS and cloud UC software to the service provider market. Next slide. As mentioned, we've got a lot of experience in the space, and we've seen that to be successful, there are really three key factors. First, you need to bring a complete product offering. Most businesses, particularly in the SMB, are looking for a single service provider solution for their connectivity and their integrated UC and collaboration features, rather than trying to roll their own with multiple point solutions. They understand the commercial relationship and productivity benefits that come from an integrated single service provider approach. Second, for business, communications with customers, suppliers, and fellow employees is mission critical. There's a low tolerance for poor quality, and usability of this plays right into the heart of your service to your network, but you must also carry that quality to the complete end user experience. OTT providers such as WhatsApp have demonstrated the power and value of a really simple and intuitive user interface that works natively on each device. We think the opportunity for you is to bring the best of both worlds, the QoS of your network, along with a delightful user experience of an OTT app. Finally, the industry is littered with operators who have the scars from earlier attempts to tackle this market. What ultimately differentiates the winners are those who can successfully operationalize these solutions with low cost to deliver, low cost to support that enable a scalable business model. We focus a lot of our R&D on developing the operational tools necessary for you to deliver at scale and at low cost. Next slide. I want to briefly talk through some case studies of some recent customer wins to give you a better sense of some of the real-world applications of our technology. First, there are some markets where cloud UC is in a very early stage, and providers in these markets are now turning to Metaswitch to power their solutions. Examples include Liquid Telecom, who built over 50,000 kilometers of fiber in the urban business centers throughout sub-Saharan Africa, selecting Metaswitch with our virtualized IMS platform to deliver trunking and hosted UC services to the enterprises over those fiber networks. Telia is the number 5 group operator in Europe, and they're building a converged IMS core to better support its fixed and mobile convergence. Our initial project will be to enable ISDN to SIP trunking migration on this core, with future applications for other converged services coming down the line. Telmex is deploying our Accession meeting web and video collaboration solution as the basis of its Teleconferencia Telmex offering that was quickly launched in just a couple of months and is excelling exceedingly well as a replacement of its former Cisco WebEx offering. Finally, VIP Metronet is a leading competitive provider, the leading competitive provider, in fact, in Croatia. They had a platform for which the business roadmap was particularly weak, and they selected Metaswitch not only based on our innovation and vision, but also because we were able to help with the migration of subscribers off their old platform. Subscriber migration is something that we have a lot of experience doing and expect to be doing more in the future. So whether we bring the full stack turnkey solution or deliver just the applications layer, or even just a best in breed point solution, Metaswitch brings a lot to the table for business communications. Next slide. I really like Mark's wave analogy, particularly since the weather is warming up here in the US where I reside, so long as I'm able to ride the wave and come out the other side. For those who are on this webinar now, most of you are still standing after the first wave. Good job, congratulations, but as Mark indicated, here comes the second wave, and that really involves mobility and collaboration, which are really big, gnarly waves. So in my concluding comments, I want to talk about what we're bringing here to help you surf these waves, particularly focus on the areas of collaboration and mobility, the central themes of the second wave. Next chart. We couldn't agree more on the value of adding functionality like video collaboration to the cloud UC provider's portfolio. Amongst our customer base, most of whom are competing in the sorts of mature and competitive markets that most of you are competing in today, are growing far greater than those delivering basic PBX replacement functionality. Having the ability to offer different service options such as cloud contact centers, extending the telephony experience to multiple devices, and web and video collaboration supports this faster growth. Next slide. Specifically, at Metaswitch, Accession is the brand name for our UC client and capabilities. Accession Meeting is our video and collaboration capabilities that can either be integrated into the client to allow, for example, one-click uplift of a call or chat into a video experience, or as a wholly standalone offering like we're delivering at Telmex. Our providers who are having the most success are integrating this into their UC offering, typically as part of a premium seat type to appeal to a particular knowledge worker's needs in that business. As Mark alluded to, cloud video, the quality of and cost of this is improving, such as smaller and smaller businesses. Our surveys show that 90% now of collaboration sessions are less than 4 attendees, and 80% are actually one-to-one ad hoc chat uplifted to a meeting sort of sessions. So we typically see these basic 4 collaboration sessions bundled into the UC package. Beyond that, our solution can scale up to 500 attendees, all with simultaneous video feeds. Beyond this, we offer a high-scale webinar solution that scales up to 10,000 attendees. And soon we'll be bringing a low-cost meeting room system that allows you to offer to your customers a high-quality, low-cost video room system for as little as $1,000. Regarding mobility, we're now no doubt living in a mobile world. When the PBX replacement wave 1 started some 10 years ago, mobility was not the phenomenon it is today. So today, when businesses are looking to increase productivity, enhance employee collaboration, improve customer journeys, the sort of customer outcomes that Mark alluded to earlier, they're challenged. They're challenged to support the 2 billion mobile devices used by businesses, according to 451 Research, challenged to deploy more mobile solutions, according to Wainhouse, and therefore willing to spend more and choose providers who deliver better on mobility. Next slide. Unfortunately, businesses are not finding very good solutions from their enterprise communications providers. with a complex app-based user experience, lacking key capabilities like SMS messaging, which is increasingly the primary channel for communications, especially among those mobile native millennials that Mark talked about earlier. Inferior voice quality, using VoIP rather than native cellular. So all of these has resulted in low user adoption of UC apps on mobility, and even causing one analyst to remark that traditional UC suppliers remain non-factors in the mobile market. So this creates a unique opportunity to differentiate and win in the second wave. Next slide. So when we looked at leveraging our mobile and UC capabilities, we first looked at the market and actually conducted some interesting market research that we'd be happy to share with you. Just to reinforce Mark's point that segmentation and understanding the needs of your market segments, be it by employee size or vertical, is really important as we're now in a very competitive stage of the product life cycle. First, there's a large and emerging segment of what we call prosumers, professional consumers, freelancers, independent professionals, gig economy workers who are looking for multiple identities, personal and business, on a single device. And beyond that, the micro business, many of whom have already cut the cord and conducting business exclusively on their mobile devices. These segments use communications and messaging that's predominantly oriented around B2C communications and messaging, whereas larger businesses are frequently engaged in internal communications and collaboration, as well as having more complex requirements like contact center functionality and serving the needs of different worker types across fixed and mobile workers. So segmentation is critically important for delivering the right set of capabilities to the right market at the right time, and that will provide you the differentiation needed to win. Metaswitch delivers mobile native solutions to serve these market segments uniquely and effectively. Next slide. Max by Metaswitch is an example of one of our innovations delivering mobile native capabilities to a target market. It provides prosumers with multi-identity capabilities with voice and messaging using the native dialer and network voice across any device or OS, and network intelligence on persona management. For small groups, it also provides the non-app-based multi-identity services, but also identity that's shared across the staff to enable better and more responsive communications with colleagues and customers, all with a very simple onboarding and very easy user experience that is necessary in this mass market segment. That's what I have to share with you today. For those attending the event next week, I look forward to seeing you there. We look forward to sending you the white paper and webinar replay following this event. We have about 5 minutes now, so I'll turn it back over to Francisca to handle any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. So we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, what do you mean by consultative selling?
Okay, so I'll take that one. So I mentioned consultative selling a couple of times in the webinar. That is really about, rather than selling your product, your offer, it's about understanding the customer's need and meeting that customer need with your product. So it sounds very similar, but it's actually quite a different process. And let me give you an example. As a consultant, I've done quite a few projects working with end customers. And if you like, the business value proposition of collaboration or video is seen to be, you might be reducing real estate. And that is a hard cost that you can eliminate from your business. But actually, it is a lot more than just cost reduction. And what I used to do was work with, in a consultative way with my customers, to then look at, well, okay, there's cost reduction. What about time reduction? The time that you don't spend traveling. What is that worth? And what do you do with that time? What can you do with that time when you're not traveling? And that can be quantified. It's also about agility. It's about being able to do things quicker with collaboration tools, with video tools, which accelerates the business and makes it more agile. And that can be quantified as well. And finally, it's about transformation. It's about helping customers. So being able to put all of your employees in touch with each other by video means that suddenly, for instance, links happen between different people that just didn't exist before. And you find that your business is transforming and doing things in a completely different, innovative way. And that can be quantified. So I think that's what I mean by consultative selling. And it's a longer process, it's a slower process, but the end sort of value of it is much, much higher. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. And the second question, will service providers, especially regional ones, beat the likes of Slack and Microsoft on collaboration? Is it better to integrate with these big collaboration providers or offer it directly?
Okay, so I'll just say a quick word about this. I don't know if Chris might have something to say as well, but we've come across this before, especially where small enterprises are using these free-ish apps like Slack, right? And I think what I've got to say about that is that you as a service provider have got an opportunity to offer service to your customers, and also to offer integration to your end customers, so that they get what they get is well supported, meets their needs, and is integrated and works together, and potentially can be integrated with their own back office applications, as I mentioned earlier. Now, that's, to me, that is a very strong value proposition. But again, it's a consultative sell. The other point to make is that we've done some analysis of these kind of apps and how they get used, and they tend to be not cost-free. So again, one can make a business case around the real cost of using these kinds of apps that make them less attractive than they seem. And the final point I wanted to make here is about Microsoft. Yes, what about Microsoft? Microsoft is disrupting the market. Certainly at the enterprise end, it has disrupted the market. And to be honest, we don't know what's going to happen next with that. I suspect Microsoft themselves don't know what's going to happen out of their entry into this market. But it will have an impact, and you will need to watch them. The only thing I'll say about integrating with Microsoft is that if you integrate with Microsoft, well, everybody else is also going to be integrated with Microsoft. So that doesn't really help differentiation.
Yeah, I'll add that that's a good question. I mean, I think the answer is both, but you first need to look at who you're targeting. I think I made remarks in my session about how SMBs in particular are looking for a fully managed service rather than picking out best in breed point solutions. They simply don't have the in-house IT staff to say, I'll use Microsoft Teams for team collaboration. I'll use WebEx for meetings. I'll use this for that. That's an integration project that they don't necessarily want to take on. So the mass market would prefer to get a bundled offering, a bundled solution that includes the connectivity that you're typically providing and the applications around that, and that makes for a stickier bundle. The whole is perhaps greater than the sum of its parts. We see this with basic cable TV bundling with broadband and voice, that the bundle holds some weight. Now, particularly as you move up market, there will be, and I've seen surveys, maybe roughly 30% of the market who want and like to have a Microsoft, a very strong Microsoft experience. So that's where you would need to consider, yes, how do I integrate parts of my solution with Microsoft? And we can talk separately about where Metaswitch is and how you can integrate Metaswitch UC and C business services into the Microsoft ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Chris and Mark. So I suppose this is a wrap up. Thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining today's session, and we'll be following up very shortly with the links to download the white paper and the recording as well. If you have any further questions about this topic, please feel free to contact us. And thank you again. Have a good day. Bye.